Welcome to the first video in our series covering the circulatory system. Now, the circulatory system is fairly unique among organ systems in the body in that a large part of the circulatory system does not actually stay in one location. This is, of course, your blood. So when most people think of the circulatory system, they actually think of the heart and all of the blood vessels that transport blood, but in terms of sheer mass, most of the circulatory system is actually the blood itself. And in this video, we're going to be breaking down the solid and liquid components of your blood, starting with what we call your plasma, which, unlike the chemistry term, which refers to a unique state of matter, plasma is simply the liquid part of the blood. Anyone who watches medical dramas will know that plasma is a frequent material that is used for blood transfusions for patients that have lost a lot of blood and simply require more liquid to be inserted into them. So naturally, because plasma is the liquid part of your blood, most of this is going to be made up of water. 92% of all of your plasma is in fact water, because water is the primary solvent within the body, and therefore the water part of your plasma exists to keep all of these solutes within the plasma dissolved. And there are many of these, all of which that serve different functions. So the first category of solutes that exist within your plasma are different examples of ions. So some of these ions include sodium, potassium, and chlorine that come from different salts, and the purpose of these ions is to allow osmosis, meaning the movement of water from high percent water to low percent water in order to occur in and out of the blood. Some of these ions, however, will function as minerals, which are the ionized form of metals that are used in certain chemical processes in the body. The two most prevalent ions, however, actually come from water itself, and they are the hydrogen ion H+, which occurs whenever acids are present, or the counter ion OH- that occurs whenever bases are present, and the presence of H+ or OH- allows blood to naturally adjust its pH and to allow blood to assist in the adjustment of pH all around the body. The next example of substances that are found in your blood are gases, the two most common of which being oxygen, which are carried by your red blood cells when they need to supply cells in your body with oxygen, and the other common gas is, of course, carbon dioxide that is carried to the lungs in order to remove them. The next large category is obviously all of the nutrients that are absorbed from the digestive system so that they can be transported to the rest of the body. Now, closely related to H+ and OH- is a family of chemicals which are what we call pH buffers. Now, a pH buffer is a mixture of an acid and a base. For example, the acid discussed in the respiratory system that is highly responsible for regulating hemoglobin and allowing hemoglobin to release oxygen at specific times is carbonic acid. Now, this is the acid form of the chemical, but if it exists as sodium hydrogen carbonate here, as we've seen in the digestive system, this is the chemical that the pancreas releases into the duodenum in order to neutralize acid from the stomach, we can see that there is only one atom difference between these two, and that allows this compound to act as an acid in this form and as a base in this form. And there is another pair of acids and bases. In this case, this is phosphoric acid, but if it exists as sodium dihydrogen phosphate, this would also act as a base. So a pH buffer is a pair of chemicals, one of which acting as an acid and one of which acting as a base, that exists to keep the body's balance of acid and base relatively well balanced. A large percentage of the solutes within blood are different proteins which can serve a number of functions. Some of these are simply nutrients, others of which are used for blood coagulation. If I can spell the word coagulation properly, coagulation, also known as blood clotting. So if you, in the event that a blood vessel is broken, there are special proteins that are needed in order to fix the break in a blood vessel and form scar tissue or scabbing, which is what we call clotting. And many of these proteins are enzymes that have different functions than this, and many of them belong to a category called antibodies, which will be discussed in detail when we discuss the function of your white blood cells. And finally, a major category that your circulatory system is needed for transportation of is hormones, which are chemical signaling molecules that are used by different parts of your body to communicate with each other and make changes that affect the whole body. So, for example, gastrin, secretin, and CCK move through your body via the circulatory system. So these are 3 examples of hormones that you've already learned about. Now, if we get to the solid part of your blood, these effectively are the different types of cells that are floating around your blood. And the technical term for these are what we call formed elements. And the reason why we know these as formed elements is how we can isolate them. So in the event that a sample of your blood is taken, if we let this sample of your blood sit for a long enough time, or if we spin it in a centrifuge, eventually all of the cells are going to sink to the bottom because cells have a much higher density, a much higher mass per unit of volume than the liquid part of your blood called plasma does. And therefore, because all of the solid parts of your blood form at the bottom here, that's why we refer to these as formed elements, and these fall generally into 3 broad categories, the first of which are what we call your erythrocytes. Now, if this name sounds unfamiliar, we can simply know these as red blood cells because the prefix erythro is actually the Greek prefix that means red, and then cyte or cyto is the Greek prefix that means cell. So erythrocytes, literally red blood cells, and we know from the respiratory system that the job of your red blood cells is to transport oxygen or carbon dioxide, depending on whether you are dealing with oxygenated blood or deoxygenated blood. The next major category are what we call your leukocytes. And once again, if this name is unfamiliar, we can simply refer to these as your white blood cells. Now, white blood cells are not actually a single type of cells, and in the white blood cell video, we'll be talking about some of the major categories of white blood cells. But again, leuko is actually the Greek prefix that means white. So leukocyte, literally white cells, and the common feature, or the common function rather, that all of your leukocytes have is the combating of pathogens in your body in order to protect the health of your body, cells, and organs. The final type of cells are what we call thrombocytes, which are the least well known, at least if we use the word thrombocytes, but if we refer to these as platelets, then the function becomes a lot more well known. So platelets are these cells that are instrumental in blood coagulation, meaning that these are the cells that basically form a blockage and prevent your blood vessels from losing blood anytime that a blood vessel becomes damaged, which makes their function quite critical to the maintaining and to the broad health of the respiratory system as a whole. In the next video, we're going to be taking a focused look on your erythrocytes, being the most common type of cell in the respiratory system, and despite their simple structure and function, easily the most important cell in both the respiratory and circulatory systems as a whole.